Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. Today we have the hot location, Baxter Building. And Baxter Building is a moderately easy one to build around. However, there are a couple of things that I think you can do to kind of set yourself up better for success, because a 3-point swing in each lane is not huge, but when you consider it as a 6-point swing in that location, it starts feeling more impactful. Because if the opponent wins, that's a 6 power value that they're getting over what you could be getting. Now, if you avoid that lane, then it's truly only 3 points, but the potential value is 6. And so I think today is going to be relatively flexible, but there are a few builds that I think are going to do a little bit better. And so today we're going to be covering my top 5 deck recommendations to try out with this hot location, because hot locations are going to occur much more often. And so if you can find even the slightest advantage, then you can start gaining more cubes than your opponent, and you can rank up quicker than you would have otherwise. And so first up, we are starting with a Pool 1 Kazar Zoo build. Now, an Odin on reveal will do just as well, but I think maybe with Baxter Building, we can find a win condition in a couple of other lanes. You could run a version of the Kazar Zoo that runs an Iron Man to help elevate that power level in that lane. But the idea with this one, and I have a video on it, the idea with this deck is that you're typically going to want to curve into, if you decide to run a Bishop instead of, let's say, Blade. He doesn't really do much in this list. You could easily sub that out. You could do Angela on 2, Bishop on 3, into a turn 4 Kazar, a turn 5 Blue Marvel, and then you just flood the board with your 1-cost cards. And so that they don't really have a chance to react, and you can more efficiently place your cards where they're going to serve you best. And whether that be in Baxter Building or not, you can make that decision later on in the game. And so I think this is going to be a strong contender today. And then next up, we have a Pool 2 Odin on reveal. Now, this list runs a Storm, so we can run Storm to either change Baxter Building or lock down a secondary lane. And then if we can win Baxter Building after the fact, then we can get the extra 3 power in that lane, and then we can push our Storm lane just a little bit further. The idea with this list is that it runs a pretty good tempo early on with your Sunspot, your Lizard, maybe your Wolfsbane, your Storm, definitely if you have it, into either a Jubilee to do a random pull. You have a Jessica Jones to follow up the Storm, and then later on you have a couple of different cards to find your win condition, whether that be White Tiger to push power into a lockdown or a hard to reach location. Gamora is going to be a great card in helping you elevate your power level in the Baxter Building to find the win condition there, but you do need to be cautious of Shang-Chi's. If you put too much power into a lane, it's going to be an easy Shang-Chi target, and so be weary of how much power you're putting into each lane and what that looks like. If you're running into a lot of Shang-Chi's, maybe you switch over to a Devil Dino build and you start running a Cosmo to protect that location. But I think this list is going to be a little bit more flexible. All right, and then next up we have a whole slew of Series 3, 4, and 5 decks that I think are going to serve you pretty well with this location. Now, the first one is a Dino control. It is very similar to the KM Best version that we ran a little while back. This one, we did take out Angela since she got nerfed down to 0 power. We put in Maria Hill as a way to have an early curve. This list does very, very well with 1, keeping hand size, and 2, having tempo going into the last couple of turns. That way you can reposition their cards with an arrow, you can play a leader to make sure that you get the effect before the opponent does, you can lock down a lane with Professor X when it's advantageous for you. And so this list wants to have a lot of tempo and a lot of value early. And so Maria Hill helps us do that. If you don't have Maria Hill, and Angela is going to be a fine substitution, and it's a lot more accessible to a lot more people. Now, the idea with this list is that you can curve into your Daredevil. If you decide that you want to put your Devil Dino, or maybe even a double Devil Dino, into Baxter Building as a way to just fully lock that one down, you could do Cosmo into that Devil Dino on 5 and potentially 6. That seems like overkill. You would more than likely want to either lock down a lane with Professor X if you can with that Daredevil read. And you might try to lock down the Baxter Building location. That way you can guarantee that you have that additional +3 to those other lanes and your opponent can't swing it and take it from you. Now, this list is very consistent. It is designed to set up a last turn leader play, and leader is very strong against a lot of decks, but not all decks. Some decks do counter this one. Anything that runs like a Taskmaster as your last turn play, or a Mystique on your last turn, or something that buffs up your cards that your opponent may not get as much value out of. So something like your Silver Surfer decks, or something similar to that, you're going to get more value out of it than your opponent can. Otherwise, Leader is fantastic at helping you find win conditions where they shouldn't be there. And then next up, we have a counter deck. If the opponent invests too much into Baxter Building, this deck allows you to flood value onto the board. You want to have tempo similar to the previous list that I showcased. This one is going to allow you to set up for a potential Shang-Chi or Enchantress on the last turn. And if you can swing the Baxter Building that they thought they had, you're going to swing 6 value in your favor in those other 2 lanes, allowing you to find win conditions where they may not otherwise be there. This list can do a lot of things well. The Angela and the Bishop interact very well with the Mysterio. You can then use Carnage to destroy one of the fake Mysterio tokens. Nova is a way to buff up the rest of your cards in the other lanes. You have a couple of kill triggers for that, whether it be your Killmonger or your Carnage. Sentinel is going to allow you to continue to play cards onto the board and make sure that you have tempo advantage going into those last couple of turns. The idea is that you can drop a Sera into a big Shang-Chi and Enchantress, or a Shang-Chi and a Maximus and a Nova, or just a combination of different cards. You could do Arrow and Maximus on that last turn to reposition the opponent's cards. You just have a lot of flexibility with this list. You can take out Arrow. She's not crucial in this list. You could do something like a Leader or just some other card that you think would benefit this list well and gives you kind of that surprise factor for the last turn play. It is a very straightforward deck that wants to put out high value and then counter whatever kind of big greedy plays your opponent does. And so next up we have a Black Panther ramp deck, a Thor deck, an Electro ramp deck. It's a deck of many names. It was designed by Dunkoro and it operates very, very well. It has done so ever since Black Panther came out. When Cosmo was really, really common, it was hard to beat. But now that Cosmo is maybe not seen as often, or you can play around Cosmo, you can find your win condition even whenever it doesn't look advantageous for you. And this can outpower a lot of really strong decks right now if you hit your high roll. And there are a couple of play paths that you can do. If you have Wong and Black Panther, you might not go the Electro route. You could opt to go Thor or just skip 1-3 into a Wong, into a Black Panther, and then you can do Arnim Zola, which is going to destroy both the Wong and Black Panther in that lane. Now, if the opponent uses a Shang-Chi and destroys your Black Panther before it gets triggered, this deck loses a lot of its potency. But if they don't have those counter cards, or you're not seeing those counter cards, this list can be very, very strong. And then if you don't draw into your Black Panther, your Arnim Zola, you can always go the wide Wong path of Wong into White Tiger, into a Doctor Doom, or Wong into White Tiger into Odin. You could do Jubilee as a Hail Mary if you just need to. And then you could always go Devil Dino as well. You can switch out a couple of these cards, but this list runs very, very well as is, as long as you are not seeing those strong counter components from your opponent. And then next up, we have a Shuri build. Now, if you have Shuri as one of your early Series 5 cards, you got very lucky and you pulled her, or maybe you bought her because you just like her effect, then this should be pretty strong for you. It has a couple of ways to protect your Baxter Building lane. You can do Armor or Cosmo, and then on 4 you can drop Shuri into a Red Skull or a Maximus depending on what you have, and then into a Taskmaster on that final turn. You also have a Hood in this list as a way to generate a 6 power demon token that you can drop alongside a Shuri on turn 5. You can do Shuri plus your demon token for a 12 power push, which is not bad. It's definitely a formidable push for 1 energy, and then you can copy that with a Taskmaster. It can help you find win conditions where they might not be otherwise. And then the rest of the deck is looking to push value onto the board. You can push your Angela into a Nightcrawler, an Iceman, and Ant-Man to get some early value, some early tempo, and in the late game, you're wanting to push those big resources onto the board where your opponent is unable to react and they're not able to keep up. And one of the best things about this list is that if your opponent uses a leader on the last turn and you used a Taskmaster, their leader is not going to copy the same thing that your Taskmaster does, because his on reveal will trigger again. And so that gives you a little bit of a advantage versus leader matchups, which is very, very common right now, by allowing you to position more power than the opponent can from their leader copy. And then lastly, I have a Silver Surfer build. Now this one does use the new Silver Surfer. It is a very deep pull 3 list, and it also utilizes Bast. Bast, if you have that from Series 5, is a fairly flexible card, but it is not as flashy or as cool as a Galactus or a Thanos that just absolutely demands your attention. A Valkyrie can demand your attention. Bast can give you a pretty strategic advantage, but it's an early game drop. You use it on cards that typically have 0 power, 1 power, -1 power to give yourself more advantage out of it. And with this list, it is using the combination of Bast and Adam Warlock, or you can use Storm on 3 into Juggernaut on 4. That gives you 2 3-cost cards into that location. You can use Goose as a way to make sure that your opponent can't drop any large resources into whatever lane you're pushing that into. If you have Sera on the board, you can do Wong into the Goose lane. You have Rogue as a way to sometimes steal your opponent's Wong, steal your opponent's Iron Man, and if you have advantage the turn after they drop that, then maybe you can steal it before they drop their Mystique, and then you can swing games that, again, you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Now, this list runs very well with Brood, with Wolfsbane. Silver Surfer is just very, very strong, and it's a very consistent contender. Expect a video from me on this list coming soon, whether it be in the hot location or not. This is what I'm running as I'm ranking up, so keep it a secret for now, guys. But this list, if you do have Bast, is going to be very strong. If not, you can go with a negative Silver Surfer, or a couple of other Sera Miracle Silver Surfer lists work well as well. You could do one that utilizes Absorbing Man instead of Wong to double trigger your Silver Surfer a little bit easier, and then you don't have to commit as much into making sure that you have that on the board. If you drop Sera on 5, you can do both Silver Surfer and Absorbing Man, and so you can set up the previous turns to make sure that you know that you have that double trigger, and it's a little bit sneakier and less telegraphed than a Wong play. But I don't have Absorbing Man on this account, and so we are using the Bast version instead. But those are my top 5, plus a couple more deck recommendations to try out today while the Baxter Building location is the hot location. Let me know what decks you guys are running, what you're seeing in the meta. I love hearing how you take these decks and adapt them to your own playstyle or to whatever you're seeing on the ladder that works best for you. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. We're so incredibly close to 20,000. If we get a big enough push, we can hit 20,000 in the next couple of days, which is a phenomenal milestone for me and for the channel. But as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.